Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most dramatic conflicts of the 20th century. This was a fight for survival, and it all started with a surprise attack on a scale that was just unimaginable.
Can you imagine? That was the terrifying reality for Israeli soldiers on October 6, 1973. Hundreds of Egyptian tanks just pouring across the Suez Canal, catching one of the world's best armies and its legendary intelligence services completely and totally by surprise. But this wasn't some random act. No, this attack was years in the making.
All right, so to really get what's going on here, you have to rewind back to 1967. You have to understand the deep, burning humiliation that Egypt felt after it was crushed in the Six-Day War.
So you can see right here, the years after 67 were anything but quiet. Egypt, with a ton of Soviet help, went through this incredible transformation. We're talking 6 straight years of intense training, completely restructuring their military. By 1973, their army was massive, well-equipped, and basically unrecognizable from the one that had been defeated just a few years earlier.
But, this wasn't just about new tanks and guns. It was about what was going on in their heads. See, on one side, you had Israel, which had gotten kind of overconfident, maybe even a little arrogant. They truly believed the Egyptians couldn't fight. On the other side, you had Egypt, just burning with this desire for revenge. Their whole mantra was, what was taken by force has to be retaken by force. And that difference in mindset, that created the perfect storm for a surprise.
And this is where their strategy was just genius. For years, they ran massive military drills right on the canal. Over and over, they'd bring troops to the water's edge and practice crossing. After a while, the Israelis just got used to it. It became noise, just part of the scenery. So Egypt managed to hide their real plan in plain sight.
Okay, so let's jump to the day itself. Let's see how all of that meticulous planning exploded into one of the most successful surprise attacks in modern military history.
And their plan? Wow, it was a thing of beauty. Step 1, take out Israel's biggest advantage, its air force. They built a massive rocket wall of anti-aircraft missiles. Step 2, those giant sand barriers the Israelis built, don't bother fighting them. Just blast through them with giant water cannons. And the result? Absolutely staggering. 90,000 soldiers and 850 tanks got across the Suez Canal in less than 24 hours.
And to really understand just how desperate the situation was for Israel, just look at these numbers. The Israeli commander for that entire front had just 88 tanks. 88. And he was facing 850 Egyptian tanks pouring over the canal. That's a 10-to-1 disadvantage. It was a nightmare. So, what does Israel do? What they always do. They counterattack hard. It's their whole doctrine. But this time, they were about to run into a very, very different Egyptian army. This quote from an Israeli tank commander, it just says it all. They rolled in expecting a repeat of 1967. Instead, they hit a solid wall of fire. As he put it, they weren't just being fought, they were being hunted. So what was causing all this carnage? It was this little thing, the AT-3 Sagar missile. The Egyptians had thousands of them. It was portable, wire-guided. Basically, a single soldier could hide in a ditch, fire one, and then steer it with a little joystick all the way into an Israeli tank. It was an absolute game-changer, and it just shredded those initial Israeli counterattacks. So after days of just getting hammered on defense, the Israelis finally got a break. They got intelligence that the Egyptians were about to launch a huge armored assault, pushing out from under their protective missile umbrella. Finally, this was Israel's chance to fight the battle they wanted to fight.
And boom, look at the result. The Egyptians rolled out, and the Israelis were waiting for them. Using their superior long-range gunnery and better tactics, they absolutely decimated the Egyptian armor. In just a matter of hours, Egypt lost over 250 tanks, while Israel lost fewer than 30. Just like that, the entire war had shifted.
And right on the heels of that massive victory, they found something else, something huge. Israeli scouts found a small seam, a little gap between the two main Egyptian armies. Now that might not sound like much, but that tiny gap, well, that was about to become the key to turning the whole war on its head. So this discovery kicks off Israel's own big, audacious gamble, cross the canal themselves. But to pull it off, they first had to seize the crossing point, a little area near an agricultural station with a very strange name, the Chinese farm. And trying to secure that bridgehead, they walked right into a kill zone. They thought they were punching through a weak spot, but instead, they landed right in the middle of 2 entire Egyptian divisions. The
The fighting was just a brutal, confused, point-blank meat grinder.
I mean, the battle was so savage, so chaotic, that soldiers who were there couldn't even describe it with normal words. Just fire, darkness, blood. It was a primal fight for survival, for every single inch of ground, through one terrible night.
The price was absolutely staggering. Hundreds killed. But after 3 horrific days of non-stop fighting, they did it. They secured the crossing point. And for the very first time in this war, Israeli tanks were rolling across the Suez Canal and onto the African continent.
All right, so now we're in the end game. With Israeli forces on the west bank of the canal, the war enters its final, dramatic phase. And it's one that's going to leave a really complex and painful legacy for everybody involved.
And once they were across, they moved with unbelievable speed. They set this perfect trap and just annihilated Egypt's elite 25th Armored Brigade. Within days, they weren't just threatening Cairo, they had completely surrounded the entire Egyptian Third Army back in the Sinai. That was the ultimate checkmate. With an entire army as a bargaining chip, a ceasefire was declared.
And this is where the story gets really fascinating, because in a strange way, both sides could claim victory. Egypt had restored its national honor. They proved they could fight, and Anwar Sadat became a hero. Israel, on the other hand, had survived against impossible odds and utterly crushed the invasion. You could say both sides got what they needed most. But for Israel, this victory felt anything but victorious. This number, almost 3,000 casualties. Now, for a tiny country like Israel, that number is a gut punch. It's the national trauma that scarred the country for a generation. And that sentiment right there, that really captures the war's true legacy for Israel. Yeah, they won on the battlefield, but the shock, the cost, the sheer terror of almost losing everything, it shattered their sense of being invincible. The trauma made them realize that another war like this was simply unthinkable.
So that leaves us with this incredible question, right? How can a war where both sides feel like they won actually lead to peace? Well, maybe it's because Egypt got its dignity back and Israel got a shock so profound that it realized the old way of doing things just wasn't sustainable. And that shared experience, that new reality, that's what, against all odds, finally opened the door for peace.